As marketers and business people, we use email newsletters to keep our prospects warm and to make sales, but they're so hard to put together. They take forever. But when you use your AI, you can build email newsletters like this one here. This is my email newsletter. I'm going to walk you through in this video how I use AI to build newsletters like this that keep prospects warm, that drive more sales and revenue for your business. And let's jump straight into it. All right, so let me show you how I set this up. I started with let's get started building a newsletter, and it scans my Claude folder. I'm working inside of a folder here, and it says, are you ready to produce an issue? And I say, yeah, let's produce a newsletter. And so pretty quickly it goes off and it starts to do everything that I've set up inside of this Newsboy plugin that I use to build my newsletters. This is something that we have available to Click Pro members. You can learn more about that membership in the description. But what it does is it goes out and does all the research, pulls together all of everything I'm going to need to compose this newsletter. And right now it's gone out so far and it's digging for recent stories about AI and marketing, which is what I've set my Newsboy to look for. It looks for a data point, trivia, and a weird AI story, just like you ended up seeing in the finished newsletter. So I got a strong pool of candidates. Let me compile that document. So it's in express mode. That's one of the modes inside of this Newsboy plugin that you can set to make it so that it just goes through and builds the whole system out all at once. It builds the whole newsletter out, and then you can take it from there and start to edit it. Where it should stop me at the point where it's found some stories and it's got some research. You can see it building this research over here. It's building a document that contains the research that it's done. And then I can jump in and say, yeah, I like that story. I like that piece of trivia. I like this. I like that. And then it'll go and write the whole document. So I'm going to let it go ahead and run and do its research and compile everything it's going to need to build my newsletter. And then I'll jump back in and show you what we found. All right, so check this out. It went ahead and did the research for me and got me source candidates for the news story. Remember, these are all the sections or what I call content blocks here in the Newsboy plugin that we publish. So I do 2 news stories, and it pulled these news stories and recommends these first 2, but I'll look at all of them. It picked these A, B, C, D, E for the by the numbers section. It picked research some different things for trivia. And then that last section, which I call Oh and This, which is fun section on weird things that happen in AI. Something happened with Meta's AI safety director here. And I can go and look into all this. So I have this set up to, you can see here, it also is asking me what I want to promote. And because I'm rooted into this folder here, it knows all my offers and so forth. And that's because I installed Claude Cowork using what I call Growth OS for Claude Cowork. I'll link to that in the description as well, in case you want to install Growth OS in your Claude Cowork. It knows what you sell. It knows who you sell to. It knows your brand voice. It's the best way to set up Claude Cowork to start when you're running a business. And I'll link to the Growth OS Quick Start training. Is free. But if I want to get more detail, I can click into this research for area here, and I can look at more details about these stories. I can go check the source and do some fact checking on my own. And really what I'm looking for is to bring the human back into the loop here. I want to pick the right stories for my audience. I want to pick the things that I'm most interested in, that I think my audience for the newsletter be more interested in. So the way this plugin sets it up is that it gives you a sort of breakdown over here, just a little bit of detail, and then it builds this research document, saves it in your folder, and you're able to get a little bit more, not even a little bit, a lot more information about each story. So if I do go with this super app story right now, I can go look at these stories from the source I can see the date and stuff like that. Even though it does give me that published date, see there, it gives me that published date. And I've built this plugin so it only looks at what I call tier 1 sources. I don't want it to pull in like random blogs and stuff like that. And there's a fact checking component to this. It does a pass where it goes and fact checks every claim that's made in the newsletter. It's a great extra step here inside of this Newsboy plugin that allows the AI to go out and fact check everything. I'm going to pick the news stories that I like. You can see how much detail I have here. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the by the numbers section. And you can see it's giving me the stat that it wants to use in the by the numbers section and why my persona cares. Again, AI is able to determine whether my audience would care about this because I'm rooted into that folder, and that folder is properly structured with my offers, my persona. My AI is very aware of the person that's reading this, what I sell, all that stuff, because of that Growth OS quick start that I mentioned earlier. I'll link to that in the description. So I'm going to select my stories, and then we'll come back and build this newsletter. All right. So you see I've reviewed and then give my feedback to Claude Cowork here, where I'm going to say news stories 1 and 2, this by the numbers stat A, trivia 3. And then I gave it a little bit of feedback here. I didn't like how it wrote the trivia question, so I just gave it a little bit of feedback there. I might have to fix this later, but my guess is that Claude will fix it. But I wanted to change how that worked in our trivia section. And then the O in this section, I'm going to go with this Microsoft banned microslop story. And I've checked these stories out. You can see my Newsboy plugin gave me the sources and stuff so I could check all that out. Now I'm going to go ahead and run it, and we should be back in just a few seconds. All right. So it's gone and asked me really quickly what the ad should be about. And that has a whole format that I designated when I set up the Newsboy plugin as well. And I said, let's plug this one as an example. And then it's like, okay, let me grab the offer doc. Let me draft the full issue. Draft is written. And it runs a fact check. So you can see it fact checked the newsletter comprehensively. I've fact checked it myself. Now let me apply the fact check corrections. And then the last thing it does is it runs an edit pass with the brand voice that I use that I call Reynolds. So it asked me what I wanted to do in terms of what ad do I want in the newsletter. And I picked this one because it seems most relevant to the newsletter. And it's going to write me a custom ad for that based on the instructions I set up in the Newsboy plugin. And so it locks in all the selections of the 2 news stories, then the by the number section, the trivia, and then the O in this. And then there's also going to be an ad in there. So it went and grabbed the offer document in the folder to create the ad. Again, it's able to grab that offer document because Cowork has been set up using that Growth OS plugin that sets up your Claude Cowork to run a business. And so then it's like, okay, here's your newsletter. So you're going to actually open up the draft over here. So you can see it just in a markdown file here. So this is written by the AI. And so you can see here's the first news story. So it's got exactly how I set up my news stories. And the first time you run this Newsboy plugin, you configure it all so that it knows how to write your blocks, essentially. This is how I like the news story block is headline. So category, headline, and then bullets about the facts of that story, and then why it matters to this particular reader, right? This persona that I write to. And then here's the second story in the same format, news story. And then here's the ad. Here, you can see it wrote this ad. And then here's the by the numbers section. Here's the trivia section. And then here's that silly story at the end. And then the closing statement And then I reveal the answer to the trivia at the end, and I do Jeopardy. So has the Jeopardy reveal what our skills is the answer here. And then I've got this formatted so that it adds not just the answer, but something fun. So the next step, and this is sort of optional, but I'm going to go ahead and let Claude use the browser to move this markdown file into Beehiiv, which is where I send my newsletters. So I'm going to go ahead and get that going, and I'll be right back. So you can see that Claude is in my browser right now. We'll see how well it does at moving this over. Because I just kind of let it do its thing. The browser use part of this is still pretty clunky. We'll see how well it does. Well, that didn't actually take very long. It jumped into one of my prior posts and duplicated it. And now you can see it's starting to do some things here. I'm going to let it just kind of do its thing. Let me scroll down here and see what happens. Typically the images will pull out of there and I'll have to go and drop the images in there, which is no big deal. But it's kind of nice to have Claude do something like this where it just moves the content of the newsletter over. Okay, so there we go. It's starting to edit now. You can see it changed the title. It still hasn't changed the body at all. There it goes. So it just pushed all of the content for this newsletter in, and it's all formatted exactly the way I want it formatted because of the way I structured the Newsboy plugin to create that structure. So now I can edit this document and send it out to my members. So it's a pretty cool plugin. You can find out more about Newsboy. Just go to my website, theclick.ai, click on plugins. And if you scroll down, you'll see different plugins here and click on Newsboy. And you can read more about what's going on with Newsboy. But this is how you build a newsletter pipeline using Claude Cowork. You use the Newsboy plugin. It will set up your newsletter. The first time you use it, you'll go through some questions and then it'll write your first issue. And then anytime after that, you'll just say, produce a newsletter, and it'll start running you through this process. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you in the next video.